So as I mentioned, the purpose of this meeting is to provide these consortium-wide updates. And today I will be welcoming you all and sharing some first anniversary of OASIS consortium updates, and spend a little bit of time just recognizing our leadership and all of our participants and members that we have here. And then really the main part of today's meeting is to give you some work stream updates and to show you where we're at in our study overview. So I have a slide that we've probably seen many times, but I've made some annotations to show you really the progress that we've made over the past year and more than a year, and kind of talk about where we see ourselves going in the next 6 months to a year in the future. And then I'd like to just highlight some recent deliverables and some publicity that OASIS has garnered. And then just a quick slide at the end to show you some important dates that are coming up. So happy 1 year of OASIS. This kind of refers to our funding cycle. There's been many people on the call today who have been working on OASIS longer than a year, but our MLSC grant from the Massachusetts Life Science Center was their annual year is on July 1st. And so we've officially received funding from them for 1 year, and we've really made a ton of progress in that time. Just a few of these updates that I wanted to share. There's definitely more, but one is that we built a consortium. So we really started with a small steering team and then built up our industry members. So we have 16 industry members, 15 academic partners, 7 from government, and 2 nonprofit partners. And within each of those organizations, we have many, many members. And so I think our roster is almost up to over like 120 at this point, which is really exciting. So we're really happy to have all of you here and contributing to this important project. In the year, we've also developed some collaborations with multiple partners. So I will highlight some of those today. They've been contributing to OASIS through lots of in-kind donations, whether that be their technologies or reagents for cell painting, and some who have been even generating data for us. We've also hired 2 postdocs, Jess Ebald and Srijit Seal. They are both at the Broad, and you will be hearing at least from Jess today. I think Srijit is on a plane somewhere, but they've been really wonderful, and we've been excited to have them integrate into all things OASIS. We also have a PhD student working with David Broquier, and she's joining in to help with some of the data analysis and learnings from this study. And then really importantly, and what you'll hear a lot about today, is that we've launched 4 work streams. And so for those of you who are very familiar with OASIS, it's a big project. We have a lot of goals, and to be able to accomplish all of this, we have 4 work streams that meet usually about once a month to work on each of these kind of individualized pockets of the project and really push everything forward. And then to kind of more experimental updates is that we've completed our search for our public compounds, and this was a really large effort. I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but exciting that we kind of have our OASIS compound list that will be used for all of our experiments moving forward. And we've also conducted some assay development for cell painting at the Broad, and we are getting ready to set up the screening process this fall. So again, really exciting updates. Thanks to all involved. I'll definitely give some shout outs as we move through the meeting, but wanted to give you a big update on what we've done this past year. So I just wanted to recognize our steering committee. As I mentioned, here's our 2 postdocs up here, and I need to add a picture of our PhD student as well. But just wanted to give them all a big thank you before we get started. I hope you'll hear from some of them today, but really great team that's been leading all of this important work through. And then thank you to everyone who's here as a current member or a prospective member. I mentioned our numbers already, but we have a really nice group that's pretty evenly balanced between academic, government, and industry members. And it's really made for a really nice consortium to pool perspectives from all of these different areas. And I wanted to highlight a few of our partners that if you've been on recent meetings, you've probably heard about or maybe not yet heard about. And I will caveat that we have more partners than this, but these are ones that we've kind of worked with pretty closely in the past few months. And so I'll mention Axiom today. This is a new startup by Brandon White, and I'm not sure, it doesn't look like he's on today, but if you have interest in any of these, I can get you the contact information. But Axiom has actually developed data for us. They've done cell painting and liver assays in primary human hepatocytes. Revity has donated cell painting plates and reagents. BioSpider is our transcriptomics platform that we'll be partnering with over the next few years. Nomic Bio is our proteomics platform. EU OpenScreen and Fineros have both offered to run cell painting in the Hep G2 line. We're kind of working through what that will look like with them. And Sagaro Bio is, they have a Chroma Live, which is like a cell painting live cell version platform that we're hoping to partner with soon. So just wanted to give everyone a shout out for all of your hard work so far. And we're excited to continue working with you. Okay, so for anyone who is new or needs a refresher, our OASIS study is the goal and the mission is to gain confidence in the combination of our omics technologies, so cell painting, transcriptomics, and proteomics for safety assessment and using hepatotoxicity as a use case. And so we're using hepatotoxicity because there's so much information out there in the public sphere right now. And so we'll be benchmarking that in vivo data to our omics experiments. And the slide that many of you have seen many times is here. This is our complete study overview. And so I wanted to put it up now before we go into work group updates, and then I'm going to put it up later and show you kind of where we're at. But generally, we are starting with our developing a list of public and private compounds that have that rat in vivo data or human data. We will be screening through cell models of increasing complexity, so the U2OS cell line, HEPA-RGs, and then rat primary hepatocytes. That's kind of our focus right now, although we will be moving into organoids and liver on a chip at a later point. We will be using, as I mentioned, our cell painting, transcriptomics, and proteomics technologies to screen either all of the compounds or a subset of the compounds, depending on which study we're looking at. And we have, we'll use all of that data for a comprehensive data analysis and have that data publicly accessible and published methodologies, and hopefully lots of great papers that come out of this at the end. So there's our overview. Oh, I put this slide in as well. I think we've seen this one before, but just wanted to give a brief review of why we're doing this. And, we really want to learn about the comparisons between what can you find out using the rat in vivo data and how can we compare what's already been discovered in the rat in vivo data using our rat cell culture cells, our human cell culture cells, and then so we have our in vivo data and then our cell culture data, and how can we draw comparisons and use that for future risk assessment. Okay, so for the meat of the meeting, we really wanted to give you an update on kind of all of our work streams and the progress that they've been making. So we'll start with our compound selection and data extraction work stream. This has been ongoing for the past year, but we have stopped meetings pretty recently just because we've made so much progress. But our postdocs have continued to work through this. So if Jess is on,
Yep.
Laraka, yep. Do you want to take over from here?
Yeah. So as a reminder, our key objectives, which were, like Chris said, we're making excellent progress, is one, to establish what the list of compounds to conduct cell painting in is, and prioritizing ones with existing in vivo data in either rat or human, from a combination of both public sources and private donated compounds. So that has been complete. We have procured and purchased the compounds from the public data sources, and we are currently still working on procuring and shipping the industry compounds for screening. We are also working on coordinating the machine readable in vivo tox data set, because that's going to be very important for that IVIVE component. Next slide. So some of the milestones that have been made, and I really just want to thank the folks who are being the heavy lifters on this, with Jess and Jamie, Anita, and David. Just really thank you so much for all the work that you've done for this. So data from 29 databases was cross-checked with the data set requirements that were established for, what constitutes a compound that we actually want to conduct that screening in. We compared for overlap, and we had a total of almost 2,000 compounds that had some sort of in vivo data in either human or the rat. So the clinical data is from the DILI data set. And then for the rat in vivo data, that was a combination of several different databases that are listed here. And these is a mix of both ag chem compounds and pharmaceuticals that are already on the market or they were discontinued. So it's a mix. And then we've procured 1,400 compounds from this list in different phases from different vendors, and then prioritized based on price. Some are expensive, and also the availability of that in vivo data. Like I said, that's going to be very important for the data analysis down the road. And we increased our budgets to be able to secure such a nice data set. Next slide, please. So we have two different lists. So we have the larger list, list A. This is the full OASIS cell painting list, and this is either ordered by Broad or Axiom. And then we have list B. So this is the prioritized list. So this is going to be a subset that has that really high quality in vivo data that we're going to be able to use for our downstream analyses and additional omics work. So
Yeah,
next slide. Yep, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing. So just because I realize this might be a little confusing to those who haven't been super up to date with Axiom. So when we had our original list of about 1,400 compounds, we had not procured all of the compounds yet. We sent it to Axiom. They procured some. So the goal was that OASIS would have our original list and all of our partners would use the same compounds. Based off of timing and things, this list actually contains some that Axiom has that OASIS does not. But we thought it was important to include both because then if future partners want to use any of those compounds, we have data from Axiom as well that we can use to compare it to. So that's kind of why there's really not a ton of compounds that are in Axiom that are not in OASIS, but just to make that clear. And again, with the compound list B, this is the compounds that have all of the pre-existing in vivo. I actually should have, excuse me, wrote rat data. And this is really going to be our prioritized list because, a lot of partners that want to work with us might not be able to run 1,400 compounds. But if everyone can run the same 500 or a subset of the 500, then we'll be able to get really nice comparisons across data sets. So just wanted to add that in. I'll let you continue.
Thank you. That was a great addition. Thanks. All right, so some reminders and action items for those involved in this. So one, there from that list, if there are industry partners who would prefer that you don't want to generate data on a certain compound due to any kind of sensitivity or IP issues, et cetera, please get that done. Once the data is generated, it's too late. Also asking for the industry members to continue to coordinate submission of those private compounds. So I know that that's something that I'm working on, and we need to figure out a way to send them in a de-identified manner because we'll be sending compounds that are still covered under IP and are on the market. So we're also working, the Broad is still coordinating compound arrival and preparation. So that's ongoing. We're also, HESI's working on posting the compound list for interested parties on the OASIS website. And we're reaching out to compound sourcing companies to compile this library for partners to purchase them, just to make things easier. Anything else I should capture here? These are the actions for people to continue to work on.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jess. That was a great overview. I will mention, I think Connie put in the chat that we have our website up and running. It's we're working through some of the visual sides of it right now, but the information is there, and so these compound lists are available online now, and there's other information on there as well. But you can find it on our OASIS website, or you can send me an email. I was going to ask for questions next. So I see, Matt, your hand's up.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. This is Matt Coles from Merck. I had a question regarding the industry compounds that we'd like to submit. Some of these compounds actually were benchmark compounds that we've assessed in other in vitro assays. We don't per se have in vivo data on them, but we still would like to submit them for testing, given that they may provide us some insights in either complementary or unique aspects of cell painting in those endpoints offer versus what we've used them for in other assays. Is that something that the team would entertain, or are we really focusing on just those compounds that we have in vivo data on?
It's a really great question. Thanks, Matt. I'm going to open that to, I guess, any steering team members who have strong opinions. I think first, Matt, I should say, do you have an approximate number of compounds? Is it like 200 or is it like 20?
No, it's 15. So we have about a equal number of like 15 of our own internal compounds that we probably have the in vivo data that the team has requested. And then we have about 15 that we've just used kind of as, for lack of a better term, internal controls for various mechanisms, and just had interest in how that translates to the cell painting endpoints.
Yeah, okay. Connie or Jess, I see you came off mute.
I was going to ask first.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing, kind of the number. I mean, maybe it's something we talk about, Matt. If, all 16 partners want to send 15, then it gets a lot. But if, it's just a few, it's something I think we could talk about and discuss. I mean, I see it from your point of view, but from us, really like those data-rich compounds where we can make the extrapolation is there. But, it's kind of this go back and forth. So why don't we follow up offline and talk about that and see if we can, see if it's doable.
I think that sounds good to follow up offline. But at the top line, those molecules probably wouldn't fit into the criteria that we've made for compound selection. So, that's something that I think we need to strongly consider, because we need to understand how would running these compounds provide value to the project. All right, go ahead, Anne, and you're next, and then David. Yeah.
One suggested way that those could provide some value is if the company is willing, if we make some predictions on the 15, would they be willing to carry out in vivo studies on them, or is that just a non-starter? So that might be one way to make it more favorable to the project.
David?
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah, just for me to check if I have the right understanding, is that you don't have the in vivo data because you don't have access to the data, because certainly those molecules have been characterized in vivo, right?
So these are not really drug molecules per se, but toxicants that we have well-established literature on their mechanisms of action. So they help to provide that benchmark when we test our unknown compounds, to provide some level of insight in other in vitro assays. And so the thought was that the cell painting, given the rich data set generated, perhaps those tool molecules would provide that mechanistic understanding. But I understand that kind of does not really mesh completely with the mission of this effort, with having a correlation to the in vivo outcomes.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Yeah, let's mull that over and follow up offline to see what we can sort out. All right.
Great.
Very good.
Thanks. Are there any other questions about anything related to compounds?
There's some things in the chat. Anne made a really good emphasis of block listing. the sooner we get that, it would be awful if we, you know, ran the studies and then have to pull it out. It's a little harder, but then also if we're at the point of writing it up. So, you know, the sooner the better. I know folks have been really good about that. And, you know, those that we don't have back have been communicative, but thanks, Anne, for emphasizing that point. Nigel had a point about QC. Are we going to do any purity? I know we had talked about this with Josh and with Jamie. Is it something we're just not doing right now? Chrissy, is that kind of the end point, and we might circle back on unusual ones in a targeted way?
Yeah, that's correct. Just because of the pure volume of compounds, we didn't think QC would be an efficient use of time and resources. But if there were ones we were specifically interested in following up with later, we were going to revisit that. Josh.
Yeah, kind of toward that point, I think the plan was to get as many certificate of analysis and curate QC information from vendors that we could, right? Is that information we're receiving from Enamine?
That's a great question. I can check with Jamie and Anita and see what they've received from them so far. We're using, Enamine and Malport, which I think are pretty established vendors, but so I'm not sure what they usually send. But we can
Jamie's on, and she just QC. She'll double check, but we're asking them to provide those purity metrics. Thanks,
Wonderful.
Jamie.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Okay, Deidre.
Right. So with the ordering the compounds, and I know we already ordered them, making sure the pharma partners send that information as well, and what the all that information is. And then I know, when we order compounds had at GSK, from some vendors, there were some vendors that I would say had specific criteria for making sure that they were okay to put into, say, animals. And I would say in those instances, if we're trying to compare back to those animal studies, I'm surmising that most of the pharma companies probably do that same thing, where you can't just, go to Sigma and order some sort of chemical. There had to be some criteria where they allow those compounds to be put into the animal. So hopefully, some of those came from, some of those places when we ordered them as well. So hopefully that purity will be useful. It's just, in those instances, I would say if you have a company and they're making it and they don't have that, I guess purity, what Nigel was saying is that, the next time you order it could be something different. So that's where, some of that comes in, is just to make sure that it's, consistent. And I think that's why in pharma, we try to, anyway, at GSK, we tried to order them from a specific, making sure they met specific criteria before we order them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all of the points about the compounds. Our approach was really, there's so many OASIS compounds and we only had so much of a budget that it was a little, we went with who could really source these for us. But the intention is to keep a close eye on them. And if there's ones we want to do future studies into, or just that look odd, we should have the data, as Janie mentioned. She's going to look back at the QC data and hopefully be able to draw some of those conclusions, but all good points. Okay, great. So it looks like there's been some activity in the chat. That's awesome. I'm going to move on for sake of time. So data extraction, which is also originally part of this work group. So Jess, do you want to continue?
Yeah, so just this is the last slide. So just again, thank you very much to Jesse Wald, who has been working through an enormous amount of data for compiling and organizing all that in vivo data from the public sources. So many are complete, and then we have the being worked on. So just thanks so much to Jess for working on this. Next steps is going to be with the coordination of the in vivo data for all the compounds, which is going to include all of the industry donated compounds as well. So we need to get that list and then send that data over and work on that as a next step. And that's everything that I had. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jess. I will be in touch. So the priorities for industries are to figure out what compound to block list if you haven't. I know many of you already have. To then send, start gathering which compounds you want to send and getting that through your legal and the MTA, which has all been sent out, and getting that shipped over to the Broad. And then we'll be following up shortly with information about how to get the actual in vivo data that's associated with those compounds. That's a little bit less of a priority, just given we want to make sure we get the compounds to the Broad so we don't hold up any of the screening processes.
No, that's a good point. You can't just donate the compound. You're also going to need to send the data over, in a formatable way.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Thanks.
I can see. Just one question. So what is the new timeline? Like by what time you want those compounds to be released to Broad?
The goal is September, but there is wiggle room on the industry compounds because we're starting to screen in September, but we're going to start with the public compounds. So let's say September, but understanding that sometimes things get held up in legal and things, so we'll make it work, but this fall.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, great. So now we will move on to study design, and I know Josh is on here. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, let me get you started.
Okay.
All right,
yeah, thanks, Chrissy. So for the study design work stream, just to remind folks of our key objectives within this work stream, we wanted to develop an initial study design that includes determining what cell types we're going to test, what exposure concentrations or ranging and spacing that we're going to use, time points and replicates for the omics experiments and each type of omics technology. We've made progress there, so that gets a check mark. We wanted to set criteria for selecting which compounds to test in which assays and complex cell models. So we've come up with a preliminary plan to triage chemicals into different sets. And we also wanted to communicate and coordinate study design parameters with interested partners and collaborators. Two more objectives at the bottom was assay development. We needed to do some troubleshooting, and you'll see a little bit more on that in the next couple slides of the application of our omics assays to our cell lines and systems. And then develop criteria and selection process for advanced liver models, such as liver organoids or liver on a chip. We haven't made a lot of progress on that front yet. I'm putting that in the category of kind of future activities or activities that are just starting to get going. So next slide. As far as study design milestones and deliverables, we've developed a cell painting protocol. It's been drafted and reviewed by the folks in the study design group. We have a screening exposure protocol that's been developed that includes descriptions of the controls, both our cell painting controls and our toxicity controls, our plate setup, and the use of software to randomize treatment positions across the plate. And then what I was alluding to on the last slide, we've determined different batches of chemicals to put on different compound plates to allow kind of a sequential testing of one compound set followed by another compound set. And that was based on the data, the in vivo data that was available for each compound set or each compound. We wanted to make sure that compounds which had comparable in vivo data sets that we would use in, say, the transcriptomics or the ELISA, where we're going to test a small number of chemicals, that those were all batched on the same dose plates. So we're still working through part of that. As far as assay development, the U2S assay development is complete. HepRG assay development is in progress, and the rat primary hepatocytes will be upcoming work. So next slide. In terms of our three platforms here, you'll see that each of the next steps under these are actually quite similar. So for transcriptomics, we have a verbal agreement with BioSpider to use their TempoSeq S1500 surrogate platform for transcriptomics testing in HepRG and a subset of the rat primary hepatocyte cells. So the next step will be to run a small pilot with the HepRG cells and generate some assay development samples. For proteomics, we have a verbal agreement with Nomic Bio to use their ELISA platform on a subset of chemicals in HepRG cells. Again, the next step is to run a small pilot there with some assay development samples to make sure we're getting good quality data out of those cell models. And then for proteomics, in a second kind of a second effort, we're working on an agreement with Bernhard Kuster. And the next steps there is also to run a small pilot. He'll be running the exposures in his laboratory and using controls for those exposures whereas the proteomics and transcriptomics pilot experiments will be conducted at the Broad. Next step. Some other ongoing actions related to each of those little pilot studies. We have to coordinate the transcriptomic study, coordinate the proteomic studies with the various groups, and want to continue to meet with folks in the consortium to answer questions about study design and data compatibility. That includes collaborators that are such as Seguro Bio and some of the others that Chrissy mentioned, which are looking to test some of the OASIS chemicals in their systems. We want to make sure whatever study designs that they're using will generate data that's compatible with the objectives of the overall consortium effort. So we'll start evaluating the advanced liver models and vendors in the upcoming months to determine what pilot studies would need to be completed to incorporate some of those systems into the overall project. I think it's due to give Jamie a lot of recognition for a lot of this work. She is the driving force behind all of this experimental pilot work. So a big thank you, and I'll turn the mic back over to Chrissy.
Thanks for that update, Josh. And yeah, I'll second that. Jamie deserves a lot of credit here. She's been amazing and quick, and we're really happy to have her on this project. So if you see her around, give her a big thanks for us. Also, she's your person to ask any of these really technical questions about the experiments too. So are there any questions on study design before we move on to QIVIV? Okay, great. Well, at any point you do think of questions, we'll hopefully have some time at the end, or you can always email myself or any of the work stream leads. Okay, so next we're going to give you a recap on our QIVIV work stream. This is a newer work stream we kicked off a few, I think, in the spring. So first I'm going to have Ninke Kramer give an overview of kind of where we're at, and then I'm going to jump to Jess Ewald to talk about what she's been working on.
Yeah, so thank you. Thanks all for allowing me just to quickly present what we've been doing. So the QIVIV work stream we actually added to the OASIS project, well, to be able to assess the ability of these in vitro cell painting results to predict human hepatotoxicity, and that's not obviously the toxicity is not just a function of what the chemical does in the hepatocyte, but also how it gets there and how it's metabolized, distributed, metabolized, and excreted. And this is why we put this workflow in here. The work stream is actually led by Nicole Kleinstrauer and myself, and we kicked off, as I mentioned, in May. And the project postdocs have since actually been working really productively on the project. So they've, as some of the initial goals as mentioned here, so they've been working on a strategy to prioritize the chemicals, and that part of that strategy is, the availability of PK parameters. So think about clearance here and unbound fraction in plasma. And so the aim was to generate these PK parameters in a very high throughput manner so that we can input them into a high throughput PBK modeling platform or a kinetic platform. And so this is all part of a workflow that we have set up since. Maybe the next slide. Yeah, so as I've mentioned before, the list, so the context and the workflow itself is actually available on SharePoint, and Jess has proposed since then a strategy for triaging her compounds, and she can explain in much more detail. But looking at the procurement feasibility, the availability of high quality in vivo toxicity and toxicokinetic data, as well as high quality and high throughput PK parameters. And we focus specifically on metabolic clearance and the unbound fraction. And you can also find that workflow in the SharePoint. And so here's a snippet of that workflow. So the idea really is to review the available experimental data for all the test chemicals that are available, but specifically we're looking for in vitro parameters. So that's the intrinsic clearance, the unbound fractions, and where available, things like the apparent permeability across the gut, for example. And so we want to benchmark that against TK data in vivo. That's generally rat, but also human. And then we would apply actually predictive models, so QSARs, quantitative structure activity relationships, and similar to, for all these compounds to generate all these PK parameters and do this analysis, compare that to in vivo data, and then apply the HTTK or tool, the IVIV tool, in the tools, in fact, to assess the steady state concentration and the maximum concentration. And so we'd be using 1 compartmental models and 3 compartmental models and a whole PVK model to do so. And that's how we would then apply a quantitative in vitro to in vivo extrapolation to estimate these effect concentrations in vitro to in vivo bioequivalent doses. And I think this is where Jess can come in and explain what she's done so far.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Jess, do you want to go ahead and chat about the ongoing actions?
Sure. Yeah, so one of the things that I've been working on is comparing these pharmacokinetic parameters across all of these different sources. So we've done a bit of a literature review and downloaded a whole bunch of PK parameters from in vivo sources, from in vitro sources, and then we have the predicted parameters based on the in silico QSAR models. And so just kind of for curiosity's sake, compared across these sources to see how big of a difference it makes depending on where we get those parameters from. Another thing I've been looking into, which was not something we had considered initially, was an in vitro mass balance model. So this is where you have like the nominal concentration that would get added to the well during screening. This might be very different from the concentration that actually gets into the cell, but this is something that folks have developed models for. And I'm looking into John Arnott's work, especially with the EASY suite, and trying to understand if we can use an approach like that to improve our reverse dosimetry modeling. And then also, like, we've just initially been looking at the very basic PK models, the 1 and 3 compartment in the HTTKR package. I'm looking into a little bit slightly more complex models, but I don't really have specific details to talk about for that yet. Thanks.
Thanks, Jess and Ninka and Nicole, for all of your work on this work stream so far. I will mention, I think I had it on a slide, but for anyone who wants kind of a recap of QIV-IVE, an introduction, if you will, and how it's being used in OASIS, we recorded our first presentation, and Ninka gave a really nice overview. So if you want to check that out, that's posted on the SharePoint. Are there any questions to this work stream? Great. We'll go ahead and move on, and I will show at the end when all of these workstream meetings are. So if you're interested in getting involved, please let me know. I can make sure you have the calendar invitation. Okay, we'll move into data management and integrative data analysis workstream. I believe Shantanu, are you here and available to talk? Okay, actually, I don't think he is here today. All right, I'm happy to go ahead and start talking through this, and anyone from the work stream is welcome to jump on and help me out. So really, the work stream is kind of 2 work streams put into one, data management and integrative data analysis. So I kind of made the slides to reflect that, because they are 2 different work streams with 2 different goals, but just given the amount of data we have right now, which is little, that we kind of combined them into one meeting. And so really for data management, our goals are to, identify what storage solutions we need, come up with policies about data access. So, what can the partners see? What can the steering team see? What can the public see? And then at what time points? So, the goal is to have all this data accessible to you all and accessible to the public. But there's a lot of intermediate steps as far as, collecting the data, having Jess and Surjit and others analyze the data into forms that are workable and cleaning those up. And so we're really trying to think strategically about how how and when to release this data. That includes defining embargo periods, and I think the rest of these kind of are encapsulated in what I just said, you know, making sure we have the right data portals, the access, all of those things. And as you can see, none of these are really checked off because we just launched this work stream in June, I believe. And so on the other side, our integrative data analysis is you know, really focused on the data that we're going to get out of OASIS and our partners in the in vivo data, and how to work all of these together to answer the big questions that OASIS has. And so that includes things like specifying the data processing for each data type, and deciding on workflow engines and implementing strategies for code sharing and collaboration. And so kind of some broad statements there, but really getting to how do we make this data, this massive amount of data that we're going to generate, work for OASIS in answering our questions. And so since June, we have had a few meetings and a little bit of work in between, in which we've started preparing a document that fleshes out these key objectives that I showed on the last slide. So we kind of have each objective and then lots of notes on thoughts and ideas about how to answer each one of them. But we're fleshing that out right now, and would be happy to have input from the group if people are interested in kind of the technical details here. Jess has walked through a proposal for harmonizing the information from various sources. Jess, do you want to give like a 30-second what the plan is right now?
Sure. Yeah, I guess we are trying to balance being as transparent as possible, and then also having data available that is actually understandable and usable by other people. So we've decided to create just a project-specific GitHub where we have everything documented, you know, every database that we downloaded things from and the date upon which it was downloaded, and then all of the scripts that we use kind of combine and merge the data together. That's all available in a GitHub repository. And then the really clear kind of polished final tables we hope to make even more accessible by posting on the OASIS website or distributing in other ways. And that's all separate from like the actual omics data, which is really big and bulky. And so that will likely live in an S3 bucket. That'll just make it easier to bulk download in large quantities.
Thanks, Jess. And we've also discussed, you know, the need for what data we need to answer our questions. And most of this will be generated within the OASIS experiments or the public in vivo data that Jess has compiled from online sources. But we've also discussed what kind of information we will need from our industry partners. And I will say these are some ideas here. They're not set in stone yet. And so if you're an industry partner reading this, I will get you kind of a more finalized list of what we're looking for. But we really want to balance the anonymity of your compounds, understanding that they're blinded, with, you know, how much data can we get from them to be able to do the comparisons that we want to do. And so this is an ongoing conversation in the group that will pull our industry partners into, to, like I said, kind of walk that line as we move forward. Okay, and then I've mentioned Axiom already. So this is one of our partners that has already generated data for us. And so really for this work stream, that's kind of our first step, is going through this data. And so their study details are listed over here on the right. As I mentioned, if anyone's interested, I have lots of decks from them, and I'd be happy to put you in contact with them. But they've run about 1,100 OASIS compounds in primary human hepatocytes, and they've generated cell painting data as well as some biochemical MTT and LDH data. And so this is a really nice way to start developing our analysis pipeline. So we have an agreement set up with them. They are, I believe, transferring to the Broad if they haven't already, like very soon. And then this will be kind of our first set of data to work through, which is really exciting and will give us, as I mentioned, some opportunity to develop pipelines and to think about how we'll manage the OASIS generated data that's starting this fall. Are there any questions on the data management and integrative data analysis workstream? Okay, I see. Oh, thanks, Nigel, for the recommendation of a paper. Okay, great. All right, well, we'll go ahead and move on there. So as I mentioned, those were our 4 work streams, and I wanted to just kind of give you an update of where we're at as a big picture. I'm a visual learner. I think many of you are too. So, you know, it's really exciting because today we were able to present that we've made progress in actually every area of OASIS, even though most of our time has been spent at the beginning of this pipeline. So we have our finalized compound list. Our data extraction is going really well. We have study design, our assay development is moving. We've launched our QIVIV work stream to start putting together some of the data that we need that before we get the OASIS data. We've launched our data management work stream, and we've already made our compound list available for the public, which kind of gets at this last goal here. There's some notes here on the bottom, but just really wanted to give you an image that OASIS has been moving forward, and we're really proud of all the work that has gone into it so far. This is just another opportunity. Are there any other questions about the study design or work streams before I kind of move on to just some housekeeping business? Okay. So with the remaining 10 minutes that we have, I just wanted to give an update on, you know, as I mentioned, the last year of awards and publicity and some of the things that have been going on within OASIS that are separate from the study itself. And so I wanted to recognize both of our postdocs who have won multiple awards and have been applying for fellowships and different awards using, you know, concepts of OASIS. So Jess has been awarded a Syngenta Fellowship along with the Banting Postdoctoral Fellowship, which I know is a really hard one to get, so congrats to you. Srijit has also been awarded the Complement RE Challenge, and I know he's applied for a few other fellowships as well. And so wanted to make our members aware that, you know, the support of the postdocs has already been really wonderful for OASIS itself, but also for their training and development, that they've been able to take concepts and apply for their own professional development, which is exciting, and we're really happy for them. Additionally, between Jess and Srijit and Connie and myself, we've had on the bottom of this line is a few of our poster presentations and invited talks that we've completed, and a few of the upcoming talks that we have planned for OASIS. And also very excitingly, David Roquier and myself are co-chairing a session on fundamentals and evolving uses of cell painting and toxicology studies at Eurotox in 2025. And so David will be speaking along with Peter Mark Stoltling, Jess Ewald, Joe Neffler, and Claire Picorno-Mercier. And this will all be related to, well, Jess will specifically speak to OASIS, but everyone will kind of speak to cell painting in their respective fields. So we're excited, and if you need a vacation to Athens, you should come hang out with us. Okay, and then finally, I wanted to just chat that our steering team has started to talk about our first OASIS paper. This will be a consortium kind of strategy manuscript, and we've started putting together an outline, and David's leading this effort. So we'll keep you posted, but the goal is to kind of have a strategy paper out within the next, 6 months or so, depending on how quickly we move, to introduce OASIS and really have a nice background paper to set us up for our future publications. Okay. And finally, our upcoming meeting schedule, I just wanted to give some updates. So as I mentioned, our compound selection full work stream has sunsetted, although the work has continued, but now that compounds have been procured, we were able to kind of sunset that work stream. But our other 3 work streams are still moving forward. And so our study design work stream meets once a month. Sometimes this is just Josh, Jamie, and a few of us just catching up on things. And then sometimes this is the full members meeting. And so the goal is to have a full members meeting in August to go over some of the upcoming decisions that we need to make, as Josh outlined during his talk. The QIVIVE work stream meets monthly along with the data analysis work stream. And so data analysis has just been a small team for now because we were just working through that strawman document, but we're going to open that meeting up to the full committee this fall. And then for our general members meetings, we have the 2024 eStar annual meeting on November 13th. And so for those who maybe not as familiar with HESI or our structure, this OASIS consortium sits within our eStar committee, which is like our genomics committee. And so we have a full meeting where each group gives a presentation. And so we'll kind of use that time to do our general members meeting because it'll be this sort of an update. So anyone is welcome to attend that presentation and also happy to have you stay and listen to what else is going on in eStar. And then we'll schedule another general members meeting in early 2025, and we'll very hopefully include a discussion and presentation of real live OASIS generated data. So with that, if you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to Connie or myself or any of the workstream leads or steering committee. But that's all I have for today. So I'm happy to take any other questions. Oh, Philip, I'm so sorry. Yep, Philip is presenting it in Eurotalks. I don't know why I keep writing Peter. Thank you.
If you don't make my last name Marx Stalin, I'm happy.
Appreciate it. I will make that change. Thank you. Connie posted in the chat our eStar annual meeting that's coming up. So if you're interested in that, you can click on that link and there'll be more information to follow. And any other questions? Okay. Well, I just want to reiterate a big thank you to everyone on the call. It's been wonderful to work with you this last year, and we're really excited for where things are going. So happy to provide any updates. Please contact us with questions or anything you need in the meantime. But I hope you all have a great rest of your summer if we don't see you for a little while, and hopefully we'll get you on some of our OASIS calls coming up. So have a great rest of your day, everyone.